and I'm with Mom, and we're looking at Kackin's notebook that she made in
Aunt Catherine's photograph album, which is made of, covers are of tooled leather, which she embossed when she was a patient at the Adam de Nervi.
Okay. Now I see this one here. There's a picture of Grammy.
That's Mother, and this is Father, and this is one of his early cars. And this was when they were very first married. And Daddy used to do a lot of traveling on his business.
Uh-huh.
And over here is Dorothy Durkee's 6th birthday party, and this is Dorothy and Ruth, and Betty is in there someplace.
Uh-huh. And how are they related?
Dorothy and Ruth are first cousins to me on my father's side, and Betty was Mother's youngest sister, and they were 2 years apart, each of them.
Okay.
I don't see anything too interesting here. These are all Mother's trips with Daddy, and she loved to go with him and thought it was such fun. We're largely through New England and then up into Canada sometimes. And here's a Victoria. I think this was up in Montreal, but I'm not sure. Yes, I'm quite sure it is.
If you can keep them down,
all right,
then they don't wiggle.
The bow of Grandpa's Vivara.
Oh, this is one of his first boats.
My grandfather, your great-grandfather, Lowry. Lowry. And these are pictures on the beach up at Old Orchard. Notice Mother's bathing costume.
Oh, hold on to that for a sec. Let me see if I can focus in on it. That is Grammy Ruth.
Grammy Ruth, right. And this is Grandpa down here in his bathing costume. And in all his lifetime, he never went to trunks because he didn't feel it was right for a man to expose his chest. And he was a very hairy one. This is Aunt Helen at the helm of Vivara.
Oh.
Over here, just more traveling. And more traveling.
Yeah.
And these are in Bath, Maine, the family's home. Oh no, this may be another. We'll have to compare that picture.
Actually, this is the one in Maine that Chuck and Becky tried to find the picture of.
Yeah.
I see.
Because as a little girl, I remember going up there to visit Grandma's home. But Grandma didn't even live there at that time, but she grew up there. And my father used to visit there when he was a young boy. And this is Dawn, which was the dog that Mother and Father had when they were first married and lived in on Audubon Road in Back Bay. And this is Daddy loved cars, and he had a series of different ones. For a long time they were all open cars. And there's dear Dawn. And this is Aunt Catherine, my great aunt. We called her Kackin. She never married, and she was the one who tooled this book. And she was so helpful to Mother when my grandmother when Mother was born, that she always felt Mother was her child. She felt very, very close to Mother, and it was turned around too. And this is Mother and Father in their first apartment in on Audubon Road, and they called it the Bluebird's Nest. And I think you can see the bluebird china, which I still have. And this is Uncle Bun, who was Mother's only brother. And this is Betty, her youngest sister. And Betty had a lot of trouble with mastoid when she was a little girl and was often in the hospital for that. And more of their trips. You can see how much Mother enjoyed it and how much, I'm really surprised at all the photographs because as she grew older she was never in the least interested in photography. And now we come over here to great-grandmother.
This is a very special picture. Let me try and find it. There we go.
Great-grandmother Lowry. That was my mother's grandmother's Lowry. And over here is the family of Aunt Jenny, who was my grandfather's sister. And she is Aunt Jenny and Uncle Thomas. And this was our cousin Charlotte, who lived in Katuitt until fairly recently. And this is Winnie, that I used to see every summer, and her older brother. They lived in Worcester. And this is Audubon Road, where we lived when I was little.
This was in Boston or near Boston?
Yes, it was near the Museum of Fine Arts. And this is my grandfather in that apartment. And that's a Tiffany lampshade. When I was a little girl, I threw a ball and broke it.
Oh dear.
Terrible, terrible, terrible. Another one of Daddy's cars with the awning up, or what do you call it? The roof of the car. And then we had isinglass curtains that you pull down in the winter or when it was raining. And this windshield in the summer, it opened and so that it would go crosswise, and all the fresh air would come in as you were driving along. And oh, it was most refreshing because of course we didn't have air conditioning. And again, this is mostly Orr's Island up in Maine, where Daddy's family seemed to go a lot. And this is inside the old cottage at Falmouth, the one called the Tower House or the Yellow House, and this was Bunny going to the hospital. I think he had scarlet fever at that time.
Oh dear.
And these are just more pictures of picnicking along the road. They even got my grandmother to go, which is amazing. I never could imagine her doing that.
Who were these people?
Well, they're not people they're friends of Nenny's. This is Nenny and so forth. This is Mother at Gay Head out in the old Indian reservations. Now is so developed. So developed.
Let me see if I can just get in there for a second. There we go. Hold on. So she must have been like 20 then?
Oh, no. See, she has long hair. She's about 14 maybe. 12, 14.
So that's Grammy Ruth at age 14.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And this is on the beach. This house disappeared in the hurricane, but I think this is the old cottage behind.
See, so this is Falmouth.
This is Falmouth, right.
Oh.
And Cousin Grace is there, and I haven't been able, she's a cousin on my grandmother's side, and I haven't been able to quite focus down on how she fits in, except I do remember her. This is the house in West Newton where Mother grew up most of her growing years. And now I'm beginning to come into the picture.
I see, so that's you.
Yeah, right. And this is the old Falmouth cottage. On the side of it.
Yep.
And this is Dwight McVitie. I remember the McVitties. They used to be there, and they were grandchildren of the Arm & Hammer Soda Company people. And I think this was up in... This is Precious Kackin, my great-aunt Catherine.
Let's go back to that for a second, because I was trying to catch There we go. Right. Okay.
These are at Orr's Island,
Uh-huh.
and the Boyces.
That's, the grandpa is swimming there.
Right, right.
Uh-huh.
I don't think we want to go into too much more detail
Uh-huh.
there.
Okay.
This is my second cousin on my father's side, Harriet Redfin. And when I was little, we were quite friendly with that family. And she eventually moved to Ravenna, Ohio, and I have lost track of her. I don't know where she is or what happened. This is when we left Boston, my father rented the bottom of this house at 62 Plaisted Road in Newton, very near the railroad. The elevator, the trolley cars ran out further here, 2 or 3 blocks, 2 or 3 home sites away. And this is his Overland, and I couldn't keep up with the cars he had. He had so many different ones. And over here is my dear grandfather Durkee, who was a pharmacist.
Oh, okay. So he is one of the people that you speak of in the book.
Yes, yes.
Try and focus in here. And who is he holding?
He's holding me.
So this is Grandpa's
father.
Father. Who was a pharmacist in Vermont.
No, he grew up in Brandon, Vermont, and there's still Durkees up there. But he lived in Brookline and Newton, and his pharmacy was on Boylston Street, I believe.
I see.
And it was, at one time, I've forgotten whether it was the largest or the next to the largest pharmacy in Boston. And also, he was one of the ones that was always open all night because of doctors needing medications.
And this other picture up above is you and Grammy.
Yeah, right.
That's a wonderful picture.
Mother must have been a very loving mother. I know she was. I know she was. And these are Falmouth. And Falmouth again. And this was my father when he was training up in New York State at Plattsburgh for World War II when they were enlisting people. And he lasted for a while, but his hip, which had been so damaged in his childhood, his hip kept him, he couldn't ride horseback. That was what I guess was the deciding factor. And this is interesting because this is the 62 Plaisted Road, and before Gene
was... Who is the baby in the...
That's me. These are all babies of me. That was where we lived until about 1925, and then we moved across the street to this house, which was 63 Plaisted Road, and which had a fireplace, and it had... well, it was considerably bigger. Considerably bigger. And this was, I always loved that old sleigh, and I wish so much I'd had something like that for my own children. But we didn't find one until they had them up in Canada, but by then my children were too big. And this is about the only picture of my brother Robert, who was born when I was 2 years old and only lived a few days.
So the baby on the left is Robert.
And recently, when I went down to the Newton Cemetery and Mother's ashes were put into the grave, the whole grave was opened up, and there were the canisters labeled with my father and my grandfather, and there was a little small canister, and it was my dear little brother Robert. I just felt so, I just had difficulty all of a sudden because he'd never come that close to me because I really didn't remember. And I often think of how when I was 2 years old and Mother lost that baby and she came home from the hospital, how she must have cuddled me and loved me, and she was a very loving person. And this is Dottie, who's my favorite doll. For many, many years, and she's Dottie's being hung outside the carriage.
Okay, hold on. Let me try and catch that. I'm not focusing very.
And only lived a few days.
Hold on. So the person, the baby on the left, is Robert.
And recently, when I went down to the Newton Cemetery and Mother's ashes were put into the grave, the whole grave was opened up, and there were the canisters labeled with my father and my grandfather, and there was a little small canister, and it was my dear little brother Robert. I just felt so, I just had difficulty all of a sudden because he'd never come that close to me because I really didn't remember. And I often think of how when I was 2 years old and Mother lost that baby and she came home from the hospital, how she must have cuddled me and loved me, and she was a very loving person. And this is Dottie, who's my favorite doll. For many, many years, and she's Dottie's being hung outside the carriage.
Okay, hold on. Let me try and catch that. I'm not focusing very well. There we go. Sort of. Okay.
And these are pictures of my great grandfather. Oh, here he is. I think it was his 90 or 95th birthday, and he didn't live too much longer after that. And well, here's a picture of this with this great grandfather with my mother and father and me. And up here is more of the extended family, and these are the twins, little boys, that were there that I was fascinated with, and I still have no idea how they fit into the family. I haven't been able to trace that.
You're sort of referred to as the twins.
Right. But I was, as a little child, I was so impressed with those twins. They were far more fascinating to me than this great-grandfather. And this is in the old cove, and that's the Vivara. And this is the old Laconia Tavern in New Hampshire. And there's Father's car again. We always had long running boards.
And over on the other side, in the middle, is that you?
That's me. That's me, and I think that often I see little Meglet in me, which is funny. Did I turn 2 pages? Well, now this is great-grandmother on my mother's side. This would be great-Grammy Martine, and Mother called her Dammy. Dammy. But I don't remember her, but I just remember Mother. She was those grandparents were very special. The grandfather was an inventor, and he made children's toys. He made the banks. He invented a lot of those banks where you put a penny in and something bites it or something. And we have a big ad about the Martine kerosene heater.
Sort of like Chuck's video games, sort of a mechanical version of the same scheme.
And this is Margaret, Barker, Cope, Merrill.
Whoops, I've just come to the end of the tape. Well, I'm going to stop.